Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today on this sunny, temperate Sunday, and it's the kind of tag that I might ordinarily have skipped, even scorned. It was created by Taylor at the Babbling Bee, and it's called the Comfort Reading Tag. I'll leave a link to Taylor's channel down below. I've watched a bunch of her videos now, and I like her channel. And I saw it on Olive's channel at a book Olive. I'll leave a link to that as well. I don't think either one of them tagged me, but the title of the whole concept of the thing, the comfort reading tag, immediately got my interest. Because ordinarily I would scorn that idea. As I mentioned in an earlier tag just this week, comfort really doesn't usually play a part in my interaction with books. Usually it's combat, not comfort. But Olive is in the trenches, same as I am. She knows exactly what that feels like. She knows exactly what it feels like to have critical reading for money, for an audience, as a big active part of the reading that you do all the time, not just once in a blue moon, but all the time. That kind of reading, that kind of critical reading with a review brewing in your head, knowing you're responsible for the book, is in a way antithetical to comfort reading as it's typically understood on BookTube. And if Olive can do this tag, so can I. She is not only a jobbing freelance reviewer, same as I am, but she's also a regular reviewer for a very old, respected B-level print newspaper. In her case, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And I am as well. A regular reviewer for a well-respected B-level, and that's not an insult, there are only 3 A-level papers in the country anymore, old print newspaper, in my case, the Christian Science Monitor. So if she can do it, I can do it. And besides, comfort reading is legitimate. It is a legitimate category for reading. So let's look at these questions, and of course I'm tagging all of you. You've probably done your share of comfort reading. Even I have, as you're going to see. So question number 1 is The Kettles On. A book of steadfast comfort, always there for you, makes any day better, like a cup of tea or your favorite warm drink. And again, this is the kind of terminology that I tend to bridle against. Because in my critical world, I don't think of books as my friends. I think of them as gazelles on the open savanna, and I am a lion in the grass. But there are plenty of books that I use along these lines, and the one that came to mind is The Last Hurrah by Edmund O'Connor, a great American comic novel. In my opinion, one of the 2 great American novels about politics. The Last Hurrah by Edwin O'Connor would be the comic version of that, and then All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren would be the tragic version of that, although they both have plenty of comedy and they both have plenty of tragedy. And The Last Hurrah is about an old lion of a ward politician in a city that isn't named, but is clearly Boston, who is contemplating one last run, one last hurrah, one last run for office. Even though he and his old lieutenants know perfectly well that the political world that he grew up in and largely embodies is changing. That old money-doling ward politics is going out. It's disappearing, for good or ill. That one of the geniuses of The Last Hurrah is that by the end of the book, you're not 100% sure that it's for good that it's going. Your O'Connor makes you aware of the good that system could do, in addition to the massive graft and the massive corruption. The massive corruption is pointed to by the fact that the main character in the book is clearly patterned on a legendary Boston mayor named James Michael Curley, who knew a thing or two about corruption. So I'm going to say The Last Hurrah, and I'm also going to recommend it. Prompt number 2 is Grandmother's Quilt, a book that reminds you of a loved one, or of comforting book that was given to you to read aloud by someone dear. And here, I looked for this book. I am sure that I have a copy of it, but I cannot lay my hands on it, mainly because it's so tiny. It's a one-of-a-kind thing. It's a little booklet called Red. It's a little picture book about a little dog named Red, who was a real dog, and was a real person. He used to come in on the shoulder of a regular customer of mine at the bookstore where I worked. This lady would bring him in on her shoulders, a tiny little thing, half Frida's size. And the reason she carried him on her shoulder all the time, he was on her shoulder even when she sat down for coffee in the cafe, was because he wasn't particularly friendly. He was an older, cranky, sort of mean little dog, although adorable. He was adorable. And he used to lose his cookies when he would see me. Even if it was a long way away, he would lose his cookies and start to just squirm and vibrate on her shoulder to get to me, to cover me in kisses, and for me to cover him in kisses. And we did every time. The first time was a little bit odd because his owner was naturally skeptical. I said, well, I know he looks cute, but I can't let him anywhere near you. He might think that he's friendly, but the minute he realizes he doesn't know you, he's going to snap at you, and I don't want anything like that to happen. I had to tell her, he's not going to snap at me. He's not going to do that. Take my word for it. And eventually, she was very happy to see that this dog had another friend in the world, and would come in every day with Red on her shoulder, and I would have an elaborate smooch session with him. And eventually, she came in with a book. Came in with a little plastic self-published book called Red, which had Red's picture on the cover. And it had his picture on every one. It had like 10 pages. And it was, on the surface, a self-published book about using a dog named Red to teach children different colors. There's a different color on every page, a different picture of Red, usually with him highlighting some of that color, a new coat or a bow or something like that. And she gave it to me. She signed it, and she gave it to me. And she gave it a wonderful inscription, and I'm not sure that there are any other copies of that book. I'm pretty sure that I have the only one, and Red is long since gone. I'm 100% sure. As far as I know, maybe even his owner is long since gone. She wasn't a spring chicken. That book, I will sometimes take out and just look over it again, because it's so sweet. It was so sweet of her to do that. Then prompt number 3 is Warm Spices, a book with particularly vivid prose or imagery, a story comforting in its richness, depth, or vibrance. Here I'm going to choose Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. A book that I've read many, many, many times. I've recommended it a million times to a million people. I've given away so many copies of that book. And yet, every time I open it again, I am struck all over again by how brilliantly it is written. It is just so gorgeous. That's the one I'm going to recommend. Fingers crossed for a Library of America volume of Annie Dillard in my lifetime. Prompt number 4 is Candlelight, a book that keeps you going or encourages you when things feel dark. I don't really have an answer for this. I was a little bit derailed by the whole Candlelight thing. I've read by Candlelight many, many times, and I don't prefer it because I've always got dogs bumping into things and knocking things all around. That makes me nervous to have fire like that with dogs nearby, including once upon a time for 15 years, an old Basset Hound who's in some of my videos. And when Lucy was old and blind and slow for a large chunk, for maybe 3 years of her life, she just kept going that way. I've heard from Basset Hound people that they get really old like that and then just stay alive, just like that. It was very dangerous to have fire near Lucy. But really, any book that's thrilling, I could use the example of The Last Hurrah or Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, because any book that's thrilling will give me this kind of a shot in the arm, an encouragement when things feel dark. Even sometimes bad books will do that. So let's just move on to the next prompt, which is Laugh Medicine, a book that makes you laugh out loud or grin widely, coming to the rescue on the gloomiest of days. This isn't something that I revisit often, but it always has that effect. For something that I revisit often, you'd have to go to Mark Twain. There you go, those Reader's Digest volumes down there. But for something that I don't revisit often, but is laugh out loud funny, I always pick The Sotweed Factor by John Barth, who I believe at 178 is still alive. But his last 100 books have not been worth the paper they were printed on. But he did write masterpieces. And The Sotweed Factor is one of the great novels of the second half of the 20th century. I don't think in print anymore. It's certainly not known anymore. It's certainly not taught, but it is great. It is a great novel. And it's also howlingly funny in totally inappropriate ways, but still howlingly funny. There are scenes all through The Sotweed Factor, at the beginning, the middle, at the end, that will have you laughing in stitches, even though you're saying to yourself, I shouldn't be laughing at this. This is actually a grotesque thing. So I'm going to say The Sotweed Factor and also likewise recommend it. The next prompt is number 6, In Bed All Day. You've got your warm drink, a cozy blanket, maybe grandmother's quilt. Who has time to quilt? What do you read when you're curled up in bed all day, or for a couple of hours anyway? And here, this could be anything. Olive makes mention, she alludes in her answers to this video. I'll leave a link to her answer as well. But she alludes to the fact that, you've always got a book on the boiler. You've always got at least one book that you are commissioned to review. So, and there's an enjoyment in that. those of you who don't read critically at all. Some of you don't review books. A lot of you don't read critically at all. And a lot of you probably think that removes the joy from the experience. It doesn't at all. In my opinion, it intensifies the joy. And the implication that Olive makes in the implication of her comment in her video is that will work as a curled up in bed comfort read. The thing that you're engaged to write about, especially if you're a good editor. If you have a good editor, someone who's not expecting you to write a Hallmark card, but is going to let you have your lead, then that can be itself. But for me, if we're not talking that, it can still be any number of different things, any number of things. If it's a known quantity to me, if I know that I like it. Like, for instance, this week, it's been the Campion novels of Marjorie Allingham, which are great. They're just fantastic. I've read a bunch. I have a volume of her Campion short stories. They're 1930s and early 40s amateur detective novels and short stories, and they're really, really good. They're beautifully eloquent. And I read a volume of her short stories just the other day, and then I thought, I'm not done with Campion. I feel like reading another one. So I read The Case of the Precious Pig. There's a novel in which a schoolyard nemesis of Campion from when he was a little boy, who they all nicknamed Pig, and who tormented them, physical torture, mental torture, has died. And you just know it's not going to be innocent. And it's a terrific, terrific novel. I reread it last night and loved it. So I'm not sure that even now, for the curling up in bed category, that I'm done with Marjorie Allingham. I might pick another one for tonight to go with the rest of the reading. But again, I want to recommend the Campion novels. If you haven't read a Marjorie Allingham Campion novel, I don't think they're in print anymore. But you can certainly find them. And if you can't find them, if you don't want to do ebooks, if you don't want to buy something on eBay, because people lie on eBay, if you want me to send you a Marjorie Allingham novel, I will happily do that. I will find you one and send it to you. Then prompt number 7 is Endless Comfort, a book that brings you solace no matter how many times you read it. This is a newer book for me. I go back to it often, though. It's The Day It Finally Happens by Mike Pearl, in which he goes through a whole bunch of potential catastrophes and describes what it will actually be like on the day it finally happens. Whether it's an out-of-control microbe, or a killer asteroid, or a supervolcano, or anything like that. No matter what it is, he, chapter by chapter, breaks down how likely it is and what would actually happen on the day it finally happens. I strongly recommend the book. For the misanthrope inside me, it is the ultimate pick-me-up. Then prompt number 8 is Portable Hope. A book that restores your faith in humanity, faith in life, faith in yourself. A book that says it's going to be okay, the world is full of good things, and tomorrow will be better. For this, it's a book called Finding Home by Scott Traer. Finding Home. But it could be any number of things, because it's about shelter dogs. It's about dogs who are saved from shelters. And the people who do it, and the people who make a priority of doing it. And I used to be in the front lines of that world. I used to work as a volunteer at an animal shelter here in Boston that killed their dogs on a regular basis. It was not a no-kill shelter. They killed their dogs on a regular basis. So you could work the phones, you could work the networks, you could try to find homes for these dogs. I mostly spent my time with the dogs, in their cages, giving them comfort, giving them friendly contact, loving contact, take them out for long walks, that sort of thing. I mostly spent my time doing that, and I did that for years. So any book, really. I mean, Finding Home is a really good example, but there are lots of others. Any book that's about the people who devote their time to shelter dogs, or rescue dogs of any kind, is always a pick-me-up for me, to know that there are people like that out there. And I want to recommend Finding Home, but I also want to recommend adopting a dog from a shelter. I don't know how much I'm preaching to the converted here, but do not go to a breeder. Do not go to a breeder. Do not go online. If you want to adopt a dog, go to your nearest animal shelter and adopt the oldest dog there. I know that sounds masochistic. I know what I'm asking. I know exactly what I'm describing. You will be adopting a dog that in some cases will have fewer than 5 years to live. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Lavish them with love and affection. Give them a safe, secure, warm, loving, endlessly forgiving home. Endlessly forgiving. They pee on the bed? Forgive them. Don't even raise your voice. Don't be angry. they get confused and don't know how to come back home on a walk, don't know where you're taking them, be forgiving. Endlessly forgiving. Give them the end of the life you want for yourself. Do that. If you're looking for a dog, don't do anything but that. Go to your nearest animal shelter and adopt the oldest dog there. In fact, if you have the means and the environment, adopt the 2 oldest dogs there. And most of all, no, it's not most of all. I really want you to do this if you can. But one other item, just as someone who is in the front lines there, that I want to stress to you. If you go to an animal shelter and the dogs are all in their cement cages behind chain link, and there are 2 dogs in one cage, and you are told by the staff that they really love each other and that they are adoptable separately, don't adopt them separately. Don't take one away from the other. Don't do it. Adopt them both. 2 dogs is not twice the effort of having 1 dog. 2 dogs is maybe 10% more effort than having 1 dog. Anyway, that's my recommendation, is finding home. And also my recommendation is, if you are ready to get a dog, don't get a dog for a child. Don't get a dog as a substitute for a toy or a child of your own. But if you're ready to adopt a dog and give your life over to them, go to a shelter and adopt an old dog. But anyway, let's move on here to prompt number 9, a basket for your neighbor. Just as it's lovely to be comforted by books, it can be lovely to pass the comfort along. I know this perfectly well. I have given many books to many people. Imagining you were putting together a cozy basket for your neighbor or friend or loved one, take your pick. Which books would you include? This butts against a bugaboo of mine. I don't blindly recommend books. I need to know a lot about what a person reads in order to recommend a book to them. Otherwise, it goes astray. It inevitably will go astray. It's not like you're going to create a reading interest in someone who doesn't have it. You need to conform to their pre-existing reading interest. There are only a handful of books that I would give without knowing anything at all about the recipient. And I listed one of them here, any of the nature or natural history books from Doreen Kindersley, from the DK, the publisher. Any of those would work. They are a feast for the eye, and they're endlessly interesting. They're full of interesting information. Find something general like that, so not something on snakes or spiders or dogs or seals or whales or whatever, but on all of nature. Something like that I could probably, with a clear conscience, put in a comfort basket, but mostly I'd want to know what the person likes. My ideal situation would be not to put anything in the comfort basket, instead to find out what kinds of books the person likes and just keep the books coming, not just in a comfort basket for the rest of their life. And then the final prompt is a walk in the woods. Though we'd like to stay curled up indoors with our books forever, or at least I would, we've got to venture into the world again sometime. A walk in the woods always helps me feel refreshed, unless I happen upon a spider or something, but let's not think about that. Here I want to point out that if the spider's aware of you, it's going to be much more afraid of you than you are of it. Tell us about a book with beautiful nature writing, or a book that restores your peace. A little bit of a disjoint here with this prompt, because I walk in the woods every day. And it is restorative, very restorative. I walk in the woods with my little bean every day. But it's totally non-book related. It's not just non-book related, it's non-human. Once I'm guaranteed that I'm not going to be encountering any humans, then I drop away from English or human thought completely. That is time with my dog as a dog. So it's the farthest thing in the world from books. But I know the sense of the story of the prompt here. And I have another nature writing suggestion, Common Ground by Robert Finch. Whose name came up recently on this channel because I found a nature writing anthology from Norton that he helped to edit. But he also writes a lot of books on his own, all about Cape Cod, all about the coast, one particular part of the coast of Massachusetts that I love and know dearly. And it brings out the poet in people, brought out the poet in Henry David Thoreau. And it's brought out the poet in a whole bunch of other people too over the years. And Robert Finch is a perfect example of that. His Cape Cod books will move and thrill you even if you've never set foot on Cape Cod and never will. And I mentioned Common Ground here, but he's written a bunch of them, including one just a couple of years ago that I was fortunate enough to review. It's always nice when you're back in the game long enough to review some of your favorite writers. So I'm going to say Common Ground by Robert Finch, but I'm also going to recommend anything that he wrote. I recommend him just in general as a nature writer. And there you go. That is the comfort book tag. It turns out I have quite a few comfort books, so it's not a category that I should scorn at all. And now I informally tag you. If you want to do this tag, I would love to hear your answers. What gives you comfort in the book world? But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.